The Beggar King. It is said that the king of a town died sadly, perhaps childless. Otherwise, which king would have died so easily, often killed by his own children? It is said that on the death of the king, minister issued a unique selection method that the first person to knock on the door of the town 3 days later would be our next king. So as a result of this selection, the first person who came to the door 3 days later was a beggar wearing torn old clothes, a hat with a sackcloth on his head and a noose around his neck. So the king was this town was a professional beggar. After knocking on the door, the beggar who became king was read out the coronation by the ministers and advisors. After that, the old sackcloths were replaced by lavish dresses, the rags were removed from the hats, and the socks were replaced with royal socks. And the begging bowl? How could a begging bowl hang around the king's neck? So the gold and silver double and true pearl necklace took the place of bowl. Thus the days and nights of the beggar king began to pass in peace and tranquility, but where in the world is the peace that is found in the grave? So someone informed the king of the neighboring country that the powerful king had been passed away, and now he has been replaced by a person who does not have as much experience in governing affairs as begging. When the king heard this, he was very amused and said that he had been dreaming of occupying this town for a long time, which could not be interpreted because of the power and wisdom of the previous kings. But it seems that this time nature wants us to expand our country. So, O leaders of my army, prepare for attack and occupation. When the village informants received this terrible news from the powerful country, they rushed to the court where the beggar king Badshah Salamat was present among the great beaters and the singers. The informant requested an evacuation, which the king rejected, and ordered a general informant. The informant said in fear, "Let me tell you that the kings of the neighboring country are preparing their forces for the attack." On hearing this, King paused for a moment and then said, "Let's do nothing, don't worry." The court was very satisfied with this sentence. 2 days passed and the enemy's army reached the borders of the beggar king's town. The informant and the guards standing on the walls also saw the movement of the great army of enemy. They all started running towards the court, where the king was taking a nap after the big lunch. The maids woke up and told that enemy has reached the borders. The king got up in a hurry, heard the news of the movement of enemy forces, and said, "Okay, got it, let's do something." The people had just breathed a sigh of relief when artillery shells were fired at the gate of palace and the guards of the town were shot by the enemy's flying arrows. The people, who were waiting for the king's statement and the implementation of the war tactics, became terrified. Leaving their homes, shops, fields and orchards, they fled towards the palace, and on the other hand the army of the enemy country also turned towards the palace. Anyone who tried to stop this movement along the way had to face death and destruction. When the situation reached the emperor through the army chief of the town and the ministers and advisors in charge of the affairs of the state, he realized that water was now so high above his head that to stay in it for too long would be death. On one hand, the angry slogans of the people were shaking the doors and walls of the palace, on the other hand, the cannons of the enemy were shaking the earth. In such a situation, the beggar king announced in a packed court, "I have made a decision." The king ran towards his dormitory, and a few moments later a beggar appeared from the dormitory with torn old clothes, broken shoes and a bowl around his neck. He cleared his throat and said, "Brothers, I am not able for this government, but if you ever need a beggar, you must remember me. Thank you for your favors. I have nothing to do with this country. I am wearing the same as I came wearing, bowl and clothes. Goodbye."